Oops, coming. Yeah. Let's refresh that. It's just it says it's setting up, directing. Okay, so we could be coming up any second. Let me turn that on. All right, I think we might be here. Welcome, everyone. It is Britt and Kelly back with a June Astrology Q and A for you in this first week of June. We just needed a minute to get all of our technical components set up. So welcome, welcome. If you are joining us live, say hi in the chat. Let us know where you are joining us from. Okay, I think we have everything we need, hopefully. Uh, so Britt, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here again. Hope everyone's feeling good.
We are so looking forward to catching up and sharing some astrology with you. As we head into June, this is looking like a great month astrologically. I'm feeling very happy about it. What about you, Brett, in terms of the astrology of June?
I'm excited. Yeah, we get Venus moving into Taurus very soon. Later today for people in the US, West Coast, I believe, and for me it's going to be tomorrow morning. So that's nice. And then we have Jupiter moving into Cancer also in a few days. So that looks lovely. I cannot wait.
I know. It's so lovely to have some blessings from the benefics that we can all enjoy. Venus coming into Taurus, it feels like it's been a really long time since
Hmm.
Venus was in, a really great place. Although I think it was only maybe April we had Venus in Pisces after her retrograde. But that was just kind of
Yeah.
like the tail end, it wasn't like the full Venus in Pisces experience was back in January
Right, and we had the Venus in Pisces station direct near Saturn. So
with
that was
Saturn.
also not
Yes.
not the best, right? It was
Absolutely.
medium at best.
If there's any planet that's going to kind of dampen that relaxation vibe that Venus in
Mhm.
Pisces really loves, of course, that's going to be Saturn. So this is great. It is June 6th, June 5th or 6th, depending on where people are, that Venus will come into Taurus. And we will have Venus in Taurus until early July, until about the 4th of July. So we have a good solid 4 weeks. And then, Britt, you mentioned that Jupiter is coming into Cancer. So we're looking at June 9th or June 10th for that, depending on where people are. And so Venus will be technically in her rulership condition in Taurus. And Jupiter, oh, this is such a great change for Jupiter. Jupiter's moving into the place of its exaltation. Jupiter has spent the last 12 months in the sign of one of its signs of detriment. Venus in Aries, of course, that's one of her signs of detriment. So both those helping, affirming, stabilizing, growth-oriented benefic planets are coming into signs where they are better able to support all of our growth, whether that's healing, expansion, improving, upgrades. I don't know about you, Brett. When I think about Venus, like Venus has rulership in Taurus, but also in Libra, and then she has her exaltation place in Pisces. Do you have a favorite of the three? I know, like, technically
Ah,
they're all good, but
mm.
I know I totally have a bias. I just didn't know if you might as well.
Well, I do love Earth Venus.
That I was
Maybe
going
it's
to say the
because I have
same
an Earth Venus myself, so it feels easier
thing.
to relate, right?
Yes.
Mine is not as nice.
You have the one Earth Venus that isn't as juicy.
Not as juicy, let's put it that way. But yeah, earthy Venus, I mean, it's a very grounded, sensual, present Venus. I think we could all use a bit of a slowing down and a bit more centering in our lives. And I feel like both Venus in Taurus and Jupiter in Cancer are gonna bring that sense of calm and relaxation. Or at least I do hope so. That we'll get more of that
Yes.
pause.
Totally. And my bias, my favorite, if I had to pick one of the three Venus, like, great signs, I do prefer Venus in Taurus too. I hadn't thought about it in relation to my own chart because I also have Venus in an earth sign. I'm like, maybe that's it. Because I think Venus in Taurus is like the best of that earthy,
Hmm.
grounded, tactile, embodied energy. There's a calm to it. I love the Venus in Taurus, that unhurried, like we're just here in the present. I think Venus in
Yep.
Taurus is a really great balm for both anxious tendencies, which spin us off into the future, and melancholy tendencies, which tend to have us ruminating or stuck in the past. Whereas Venus in Taurus is like, what about where you are right now? And
Yeah.
whether it's as simple as like the gratitude for where you are, or just what is sweet or what is calm or what is enough about where you are right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love also that Venus in Taurus offers that really that sensual perspective of like, hey, wait about, our senses. What can we feel? What can we touch? What can we
Yes.
taste? What can we
Yes.
smell? Like all of that, sensual input becoming really rich and juicy. I really look forward to that. I really need it personally after the muchness of the whole, Jupiter and Gemini and then also Venus and Aries both being, not as helpful as they could be. So I do look forward to that opportunity to return to an embodied state of being, which it has been a bit more challenging, I feel. I don't know if that's the same for you, Kelly.
Yeah, I love the way you're phrasing that, Britt. And also, what you're bringing in is that Jupiter and Gemini, which, one of the things I was a little worried about heading into that transit a year ago is it's like hyper heady energy. So it's
Mhm.
very mental, it's very intellectual, but in a very bouncy, kind of busy, scattered, like multitasking kind of way, such that it's overstimulating and it's
Yeah.
disconnecting from the body. And so I love how you were just piecing in there, Venus in Taurus is a balm. It's like a soothing
Hmm.
recovery support cycle. And we will have, most of Venus in Taurus over the next month doesn't have Jupiter in Gemini. So we can really come into our bodies.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, when you were describing like the taste and the touch and the smell, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be digging in the dirt. I'll be gardening. And
Yep.
I have a girlfriend of mine who's newer to gardening, and we were at their place visiting last year, and she'd done some garden work. And she said, gardening is a lot of weeding. And I said, oh my gosh, once your garden is, you've dug in the plants you want to have, like 90% of gardening is weeding,
Hmm.
which allows you to have your hands literally in the dirt.
Yeah.
Even though I wear gloves, I'm always amazed how much dirt is under my nails. And
Hmm.
you do your gardening, weeding, and then you put everything away. And then on your way back into the house, you just see three weeds that you'll grab out, And so but the other thing in the garden, of course, is the smells.
Yep.
Whether it's the smell of the dirt or the flowers. Sometimes you're hearing the birds. And I was looking at a research study, a headline recently that talked about how calming for the nervous system hearing bird sounds is.
Yeah.
And so, like, being in the garden can be this like full sensory experience. Sometimes you can hear kids playing in the park,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
the mower of the neighbor cutting the grass. And so there, I'm definitely hoping for more garden time with Venus in Taurus, but also cooking.
Yeah.
One of the things I love with Venus and Taurus is that sort of cosmic encouragement to get in the kitchen and make something from scratch, whether it's, a curry or a stir fry or a salad or a brownie or a cake, whatever it is, the act of the measuring and the smelling and the mixing and the heating.
Yeah.
I don't know. These are all Venus and Taurus like little luxuries to my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you point out also because I was thinking about both of these transits and their connection with the moon, right? Because
Oh yeah.
Jupiter in Cancer is in the sign of the moon and then the moon is exalted in Taurus. So I feel like both these transits have this give us this opportunity to really get it back in touch with all the lunar topics in our lives, including cooking, including caretaking, and, really thinking about the value of care for ourselves, but also for other people. I feel like we all need that in our lives and in the world.
This is such a beautiful piece that you're sharing, Britt. Venus is coming into a sign of her rulership, which is also the sign where the moon is exalted. So we're getting, one of the things that's so great about Taurus from that nurturing, embodiment is that it's not just the sweet pleasures of Venus, it's that exaltation of the moon energy that we get. And then Jupiter, I mean, we talked about it like being hyper mental, intellectual energy while it was in Gemini and ruled by Mercury. Jupiter's coming into Cancer. That'll be June 9th for most people, June 10th in Australia. And so Jupiter is now amplifying everything to do with the moon. And one of, like, I love that you mentioned caretaking. I think there's this real sort of return to like the hobbies of our grandparents,
Mm,
of like fixing and mending and repairing or making bread from scratch, things that maybe it's a luxury to not have to do, but we might realize there's some value in doing it anyway.
yeah.
Even, I was just talking with some girlfriends last weekend about like, can we just start having once a month, like a Sunday roast or a Sunday
Oh
lunch where,
yeah.
and somebody said, yeah, whoever hosts just does like, the meat or the main dish and everyone else brings sides. And, in Cancer, it is about connection and community, but in a way that's simple. This isn't high luxury, lavish, over the top. It's more heartfelt and really genuine. And so there's caretaking and sharing food, that idea of gathering around a table with
Yeah.
loved ones or with trusted, chosen family. Some of us are lucky enough to do it with like our actual family because we have good relationships with them. But for many of us, it's chosen family.
Mm,
And the other concept that I really think about with Jupiter and Cancer that when you talked about the moon, just that's where I get this concept from is healing and repair. The
mm,
idea of like, how do I find the wisdom or the perspective that helps me hold my emotions or my history? That's some of the stuff I really think about with Jupiter and Cancer. And I mean, we're all so ready for that, aren't we?
yeah. 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 I really love all of that. And I also think of just the value of nourishment.
Yeah.
How good it feels to feel nourished. How blessed most of us are that we are nourished, whereas well, some people are not, right? Thinking of
Yeah.
the people in Gaza, for example. And just
Yeah.
that real wisdom that Jupiter in Cancer brings, that abundance is not about all the opportunities that we have and all the ideas that we can think of, right, with Jupiter and Gemini, but it's about what really matters and what's life-giving in the end. And I
Yeah.
think that I do hope that that will bring also more of a humanitarian aid quality into the world that we really desperately need in the countries where, that's lacking currently.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on something there because the moon is, this archetypal planet about, mothering or nurturing. And what it really comes down to is that being fed. And, we have bodies that need actual food for nourishment. And then we have a soul or an emotional self that needs some caretaking and feeding too. And
Yeah.
I think both of those pieces, like I agree with you, I'm very hopeful that the time of Jupiter and Cancer helps bring forward whether it's policies or aid, within different countries, but also across global lines, international lines, that we do have more of a focus on, feeding the young, because
Mm-hmm.
of course when countries are in famine or in war status where we don't have food getting to people, it's always the young that suffer the most,
Yeah.
and that's cancer is a sign of nurturing, of the young, of those that
Yeah.
can't look after themselves. And with Jupiter there, we get this sort of it's like a benefic energy, but Jupiter also represents, for instance, law. And so we can potentially have policies that are in support of that. One little like caution or worry that I'm like, how else could this Jupiter and Cancer go? Obviously, Britt, you and I are of like mind. We're like, give everybody the food, that needs
Mm,
the food. Jupiter and Cancer, because there is a quality of protectionism in, Cancer is, this is, for instance, from a country perspective, this is my country and I want to
mm-hmm.
caretake or protect my country first. One of my like, oh, if we get maybe not the most generous extensive version of the Jupiter and Cancer, we get this sense of I will take care of my country, but I won't necessarily take care of others.
Right.
And in
Yeah.
a smaller scale, it's like we're taking care of our community, but we're not extending that spirit of generosity or care beyond our immediate space.
Yeah.
So I hope that's not what it is, but it's a possibility. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, right. And with
Yeah.
Cancer, it's all about the tribe, right? And then the question is like, what constitutes as our tribe? Is it the
Yeah.
humanity as a whole, or are we really like nitpicking, like, no, these are the people that belong and these don't belong, right?
Exactly.
That's a
Yeah.
possibility. Yeah.
And the very early part of Jupiter in Cancer, includes this square to Saturn, which
Yep.
is, Jupiter comes into Cancer in June, and we have 12 months, until early July of 26. But this very first part in June and July of 2025, Jupiter is in this quite tight square to Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think is, the negotiation about to whom do we offer generosity, care, protection, healing, nourishment, and why? Where are the boundaries or the edges of
Yep.
that?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an interesting mix for June, isn't it? Because we have that Venus in Taurus, which is very oriented towards leisure and beauty and relaxation and stabilizing, all kinds of connections, friendships, family dynamics, romantic partnerships, professional associations. And then we have Jupiter in Cancer, which ultimately is a wonderful transit, but the Jupiter interaction with Saturn, I guess, in the mix.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, and that will be wearing off right in July, I think, more or less. Like it will be mid-June when that transit, that aspect between Jupiter and Saturn is exact.
Yes.
And then it will slowly start easing up. So it will be starting off a bit rocky and a bit constrained. Like there's a desire for abundance and for caring and giving generosity, but limits to that because of Saturn's square, right? And that will
Yes.
slowly start to ease as we're approaching July.
100%. Yeah. So the square is like one Cancer to one Aries, and it's dead in the middle of June, June 15. And then after that, Jupiter, moves beyond the exact degree involvement of Saturn. And then, by the time we get to September, Saturn has slipped back into Pisces. And then we really get a lot of like the unrestrained or the uncontained expression, if you like, of Jupiter in Cancer. So that will be kind of lovely to see for
Hmm.
then. It's
Yeah.
very much like for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, which I know is you, Brett, and me, and many of our listeners, it is the summer of Saturn in Aries. So we do have that as a piece. Uh, yeah. Gosh, it's so interesting when these big cycles change, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's so much happening. It's like I feel like every month it's like, oh yeah, there's a new major transit. Like, of course it never stops with
It's
astrology.
well,
But
I mean, yeah.
it's kind of big. Like all these big changes are happening and it's a lot to unpack.
It is. And I think there is always things going on. And one of the unique things about this sort of middle-ish period of 2025 is that like four, five, three or four, three of our big planets plus Jupiter are all changing signs. Like we had Neptune go into Aries, we've had Saturn go into Aries, we've now got Jupiter into Cancer. And then in July, I think that's when Uranus comes into Gemini. And that,
Mm-hmm.
like to
Yeah.
have Uranus and Neptune change signs, they don't usually change signs in the same 12-month period, let alone just a few months apart. So
Yeah.
that does feel substantial, I
Yep.
guess.
Yeah, and Pluto
Yeah.
is also relatively new in Aquarius as
We're all
well,
still
so
getting
it's,
used to
it's
that.
still yeah, there's a lot to like sometimes it's also hard to separate like what is actually what I'm feeling, right? Because there's so much. And
Yes.
with that, I just to come back again to the conversation,
Yeah.
I do feel that Venus changing signs and Jupiter changing signs will help us feel because it's just been a lot to just process and digest, and I do think that these two transits will help us start to unpack and feel into like what does this actually mean, this new reality, and what can I do
Yeah.
to support myself? And as you spoke to earlier, like that healing process that we all desperately need.
Desperately need. Yeah, it's been 12 years since Jupiter has been in Cancer. That takes us back to like mid 2013, from the
Hmm.
second half of 2013, first half of 2014. That was our last Jupiter in Cancer cycle. And there's something about like satiating a thirst that maybe you don't realize like how parched you are, whether that is for healing and repair, whether that is for just remembering that you're an emotional feeling creature and that it's not just about like data and information and interaction. It's about all of those things also being located, whether it's in the torso or the belly or into the
Yeah.
pelvis, trying to identify where in the body there is like a physical response to everything that maybe you're navigating, or if you've got a decision to make. Even just that simple act can be very grounding and very calming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think very simply, and I know, Britt, you have a somatic background as well. Venus in Taurus is like the joy of being in your body.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not about being in your body with judgment or critique. I'm a bit wobbly here or too whatever there or not enough this there. It's just relishing in whatever
Yeah.
form your body is and
Mm-hmm.
then moving with awareness from that place.
Yeah. Yes. Sitting and being with what is here right now, what is present. I really love that really embodied quality that Venus in Taurus brings. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It does, like you mentioned that concept of like the sensual side of Venus and Taurus, and it really does invite you to create a pampering attitude to your body, whether that's I'm going to take time to prepare my food, or I'm going to, one of the simplest Venus and Taurus things I love is just a beautiful cream or an oil and just
Yeah.
rubbing it on the skin. You don't have to go to some crazy expensive, beauty
Mm-hmm.
treatment. There are things that you could probably do at home with some lavender oil and a good quality
Yeah.
jojoba oil or something, that idea of just taking that time to actually touch with that
Yeah.
sensory connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's an exercise I often do with clients who could use a bit of Venus help, and it's really about taking something that's just delightful to touch and really relishing
Mm,
in that, and just pausing with that, what that feels like to touch something for your own pleasure, right? Something really
yes.
soft, like a really nice textured sweater, or a nice smooth crystal, right? It can be anything, but it's
Mm,
just something about pausing with that and allowing yourself to really enjoy that sensual delight, if you will.
yes.
That can be
Yeah.
so nourishing and so healing. Yeah.
Yeah. Just being with the sensation of what that
Yeah.
texture feels like.
Yep.
So, yeah, I feel like everyone, listening, let us know in the chat or leave a comment about what are some of the things that you are going to give yourself permission to enjoy while Venus is in
Mm,
Taurus. That would be
yeah.
really lovely. And if any of you are listening and you do have any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat and we can take a look. Is there anything else that you want to say about the astrology of June, Britt? I know we've talked about what we're looking forward to. Um, is there anything else that you just got in your mind about June?
I'm trying to focus on the positive. Yeah,
Yep.
there's also, of course, there's the Mars Uranus square.
Yes.
That's happening later this month. Um,
Yes, I know I'm like, I kind of in my mind, I skipped right over that to Mars going
mhm.
into Virgo because I'm really
Right.
happy for Mars to be in a sign that's not Cancer or Leo.
Yeah.
Mars has just been in those two signs since September of 2024. But I have to remind myself that before Mars gets into Virgo, one of the things I like about Mars in Virgo is the more kind of cool, strategic, analytical version of Mars that we get. Mars comes into Virgo on the 17th of June, and we'll have about 6 weeks of Mars in Virgo. So, right through, let me double check into if it's early August. It is, yeah. So well into the first week of August, and so Mars has, as a planet, has that hot, potentially reactive quality. And I think a little bit of that does get exacerbated when Mars is in a fire sign. It's that sort of that bombastic quality. It's very bold, it's very like brash, but Mars in Virgo, Mars will go from a hot fire sign to a cool earth sign. So that cooling down, that Mars principle, I'm looking forward to. But yeah, Mars square Uranus. I think that's around the 15th as well in June.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, just around that time of the Jupiter Saturn
The
square.
Jupiter,
So
yeah, I'm
that's
like, that's a
yeah.
big weekend, two big
Mm-hmm.
squares.
Yeah, yeah, that's maybe a bit more challenging that day. But other than
Yeah,
that, I do think that the astrology of June looks really lovely. And I think
yeah,
it's also good to focus on that on that, or just remind
totally.
ourselves like it's not all bad and there's things to look forward to, and there's yeah, just to reiterate, just having had these the two benefic planets in a state of not the most function and a bit more restriction, it just
Yeah.
is really helpful to have that shift. And that makes all of the astrology that we're encountering for the rest of June and July, a bit more easy to manage.
It's true. And also I think with Mars Uranus, like it is a little bit of an unpredictable or chaotic quality. It's got that outburst or that unexpected shock or surprise quality to it. But we do have those more dynamic, intense Mars Uranus aspects, whether it's the square or the conjunction or the opposition. We have one every kind of 6 to 9 months.
Yeah.
That's not an energy that anybody listening would be unfamiliar with.
Hmm.
For instance, it's been a little bit longer between drinks right now because we would have to go back to, Mars in Taurus last year to have the conjunction. But, when Mars isn't doing its retrograde thing, we do have Mars Uranus aspects.
Right.
And what so it's not unfamiliar. Yes, okay, June 15 looks like a bit of a maybe wild day. Give yourself lots of flexibility. Unexpected things will happen. But I love what you're saying, Britt, which is that that's going to be going on over there. But over here, we do have Venus in Taurus, calming things down or reminding you of where that steady, loyal, kind of grounding stuff exists for you. And Jupiter in Cancer kind of helping you maybe more quickly recover or make your way through anything that does surprise you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, I can see a couple little questions coming through. Shall we jump into those before we wrap up today?
Yeah, let's do it. There was one from Marie,
Yep.
um, saying, I have Venus in Leo in the ninth house, which is the ruler of my MC in Libra in the 11th house, conjunct Uranus. Sagittarius rising with Jupiter in the 11th. What career is ideal for me?
Okay, Marie, great question. So, often when we're looking at career, we will think a little bit about the midheaven, of course. So, the midheaven you mentioned is in Libra in your 11th house. And you also mentioned that you're a Sag rising with Jupiter and Libra. So Jupiter and the midheaven are in the same sign by the sounds of it. One thing we don't know is if you're a daytime chart or a nighttime chart, which can slightly shift things a little bit, but certainly just based on the info that you've shared, the midheaven in the 11th, some of the things that I think about that, we've been talking a little bit about community and connection with groups or organizations of people. And that is a really 11th house thing. So when the midheaven is in the 11th house, we have this focus on sometimes the larger collective. And this can be a mix of like social initiatives. They can be maybe in the arts, because we are talking about a Libra midheaven, which is ruled by Venus. A midheaven ruled by Venus can have so that artistic quality, creative edge. It can have a focus on women's issues or feminine themes because Venus is a planet associated with femininity. And yeah, that 11th house, that sense of we're sort of trying to serve a group or a community here. The sign of Libra itself, it's an intellectual air sign. So we're going to want either some sort of intellectual, mental engagement and stimulation in the work, and or we're going to want some involvement with people, having a career where you are with people, where there is interaction with other humans, is going to be important. Libra is a sign that also has, and one of the things that Libra and Sagittarius share. So you've mentioned your Sag rising and the midheaven is in Libra. Sagittarius is a sign that has really strong ethics and morals, and Libra is a sign that is really oriented towards fairness and justice. And when we put those two together, sometimes we get this because you have Jupiter, the ruler of Sag, is in the same sign as the midheaven, and Sag is prominent in your chart, as is Libra. So we do have this combination of, fairness or justice or equality, that idea of making things more equitable or more accessible or removing barriers that might prevent others enjoying things that may be more easily available to certain groups of the population. So there's some of the initial themes that I think about. And then, of course, you mentioned that your Libra midheaven is ruled by Venus and she's in Leo in the ninth. So that reiterates some of the creative themes that we already have from Libra midheaven. Venus in Leo has a very visual orientation, so it can bring in the visual or the performing or the dramatic arts. But it also brings in topics to do with the ninth house, topics like education, academia. The ninth house is a part of the chart to do with justice and law. And so this is another thread that's coming through. Ninth house also brings in like global and international topics and themes. Sometimes that is people working in the travel adventure space. Other times it's people that are working for organizations that might have a global imprint or work that might have them traveling to different parts of the world or the globe, or even at the very least outside your country. So they're all the pieces that I think about just based on those data points. Another qualifier would be, if there are any aspects to the midheaven or Venus, they would certainly be part of it. What about you, Britt? Are there any things that come up for you about career or work for this combination?
Well, I love everything that you said, and I just want to add that Marie has mentioned that she has a daytime chart with the
Okay.
sun and Gemini in the seventh house. So it would be interesting to know if the sun is also in aspects to the midheaven.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That would add further information, and then yeah, just trying to catch up with the Q and A.
Of course, of course. Yeah. So Marie, let us know, if that's helpful or resonant for you. Sometimes it is tricky to do a lot about a chart when we don't have the whole chart, but just based on those data points. Fab. All right. Where should we go next, Britt?
So there's another question from Chandan. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I'm a Virgo rising chart with Moon and Jupiter in Aries in the eighth house. How would you see the impact of Jupiter in Cancer?
Okay, so Virgo rising, Cancer is going to be 11th house, then, if I've got that correct.
Yep.
So there's a couple of pieces. One, you're going to have transiting Jupiter in the 11th house in the chart. And even though this is a very simple take and there can be other things that might override or modify this, the 11th house is the house of Jupiter. It's the house where Jupiter has its joy in the birth chart. And I always consider it to be a very auspicious omen as a general indicator for someone when you're in that 12-month cycle where transiting Jupiter is in your 11th house. Now, for Chandan, one of the things that makes this just a little bit more juicy for you is that you have transiting Jupiter in the 11th house while it is in a sign where it is very well placed. And so some of the auspicious energy here is quite strong. And what that can indicate is that you are able to access generosity, benefits, abundance, and opportunities. One way I heard the 11th house described is it's kind of like where manna from heaven just kind of magically shows up in our lives. And it's another, maybe more modern take on it is to think about it as a little bit like you've got a fairy godmother who is sitting on your shoulder. They're not going to give you everything you want, but they're going to perhaps open some doors that will be to your benefit to walk through. The 11th house, of course, is generally about friends and communities and groups. It is also a part of the chart that is associated with, so it has a bit of a link to money and financial abundance, especially from like career or government. And this is like the 11th house and its relationship to the 10th house. And so, it wouldn't be a bad thing to be negotiating salary or raises or looking at just, boosting your financial position in general. So if it's the money side, that's lovely. And even if it's not, the thing I would encourage any client having transiting Jupiter in the 11th to focus on is deepening and developing your friendship and social ties. So that idea of what are the communities that I would like to be a part of? Who are the people that I would like to be connected with? And how can I, explore and expand that part of my chart and life while Jupiter is in Cancer? And because you mentioned, Chandan, that you have the moon and Aries, or so the moon and Jupiter natally in the eighth house. So transiting Jupiter in Cancer will make squares over to those planets. I think transiting Jupiter in Cancer, squaring the moon, particularly auspicious. And so in many ways, that's reiterating a lot of those financial themes. I would say The caution would be, I wouldn't go crazy borrowing money or increasing your debt load, with a bit of eighth house activity, especially if it's like just for holidays or spending stuff. But if you're wanting to get loans for investments, like buying property or what have you, or if you want to renegotiate like student loans or tax obligations, this could be a helpful transit for that. So there's a few themes that I think about there. Britt, what about you? Is there anything that you would add, or how would you approach this question?
Well, I love everything that you said about the 11th house. And one added keyword that I sometimes use for the 11th house is, of course, that it's associated with goals and aspirations, so our like
Mm,
long-term ideals. So I think this is also a great time to start, feeling into what really matters to you in terms of like where you want to go next, right?
mm,
The 11th house is also supportive of the 10th house, so thinking about, what kind of ambitions you have and how to put that into your belief structure with Jupiter as well. One thing that Jupiter in Cancer is just really good at is like embodied goal setting, right? It's not
mm.
just like, I want to achieve this because I think I should do it, but no, I want to achieve something because of how it feels when I get there, right? And
Mm.
there's something that combination of Jupiter in Cancer and the 11th house can really help you with, like, what actually matters and how do I want to feel about this.
So beautiful. That's such great piece of wisdom there, Britt, that Jupiter in Cancer really helps you like tune into the wisdom of your body. Not just, I think I should do this or this looks good on paper, but how is it inside me? Like what happens to my breathing when I contemplate that or I sit with that? And yeah, to almost draw on the body response as a decision-making factor rather than just this is good on paper kind of thing.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to do for our modern minds because we think more information is the answer, like more data, but often it's like what's happening inside me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh, is there maybe one more question we could take, Britt, before we wrap up today?
Um, let's see. There's one more question from another somebody.
Okay.
What does Mars transit the ascendant indicate? Uranus always stresses me out. What degrees is the Mars-Uranus square at? I think this is in a reference to our earlier
Yes.
conversation.
Yeah, perfect. So Mars will be at 28 degrees Leo and it will be square Uranus at 28 Taurus. So that aspect will probably have the strongest charge for anyone whose chart has 28 degrees of any of the fixed signs that are important. So 28 degrees of the fixed signs would be 28 of Taurus and Leo, but also 28 of Scorpio and Aquarius. And so things like if your ascendant's at 28 fixed, or your sun or moon is at 28 fixed, or your midheaven is at 28 of a fixed sign, then two things are happening. One, you're in the middle of your personal Uranus transit to that 28-degree thing in your chart. If you are 28 degrees of Scorpio is your moon, then transiting Uranus at 28 Taurus is opposing your moon. And that's just part of your Uranus moon transit. And if that's the case, what happens with this like quicker, sort of like a trigger or an activating transit from Mars is that we get this sort of flare energy for about 48 hours where Mars is also activating that 28-degree marker in addition to Uranus. So it's like a little bit more of a firework type energy. But it's important to know that if 28 degrees of the fixed signs is important to you, that Uranus activation to 28 degrees is not just happening in June. It's kind of happening and then it goes away for a bit and then it comes back a bit. And we will have more activations of Uranus at 28 degrees of Taurus in March, April of next year. That'll be the last Uranus at 28. And so Mars on the ascendant, that's kind of a separate piece. So that's why I wanted to flesh that out. Mars transiting over our ascendant, making a conjunction to our ascendant, that happens once every 2 years for all of us. So all of you listening have had many Mars conjunct your ascendant transits. And it can kind of go in one of two directions. If you get a more constructive version of transiting Mars on your ascendant, you can feel fired up or confident. You might feel bold or decisive. You might feel ready to take action, to begin things. Sometimes we end things with Mars. Remember, Mars is sharp and has a cutting energy. And so that idea of beginnings and endings, stopping and starting, turning points can happen with Mars on the ascendant. If we get a little bit more of a challenging version of transiting Mars on the ascendant, we might feel angry or frustrated. We might feel like we have a shorter temper. We're quicker to flare up. We might, our tolerance is less, so we're more irritated easily. The ascendant is one of the main points in the chart that represents our physical body. And so a more challenging version of a Mars transit to the ascendant can sometimes flare up or irritate the physical body. And so that can be an infection or an inflammation or bumps, cuts, and scrapes. For people who already have underlying health stuff, a Mars can be like a more acute burst or flare up or aggravation of something that maybe is otherwise under control. And all of those things are very manageable. With Mars to the ascendant, often we have to take some action. Oh, I've cut myself. I need to put a cream or put a bandage. I've got an infection. I need to take something for that. Whether you want to go to the doctor and take antibiotics or you prefer to see your naturopath, you still want to address the issue. With Mars, if it aggravates the physical health and vitality, we don't want to just think, oh, it'll go away on its own. It might, but you'll be pretty uncomfortable until it does. So and Mars is also, the treatments that can help. So there's some of the things I think about Mars on the ascendant. How do you think about that transit, Britt?
Yeah, this is all perfect. I mean, it's not perfect to have Mars on the ascendant sometimes, right? But yeah, this is
Yes.
what I was thinking of too. Both the, more physical irritation, like inflammation, or being more accident prone, for example. That's also another
Hmm.
possibility with Mars on the ascendant. And then also just having that aggravating feeling in your mental state of being, right? Just being
Yes.
a bit more quick to be annoyed or irritated or yeah, things like that happen. One thing about Mars is that yes, it's a transit that can be, sometimes good, it can be tricky, but it's also a relatively short one, usually, unless you've had the Mars retrograde
Unless
on
your
your
ascendant is late
yes.
Cancer and then you
Right,
have to
yeah,
draw
then
it
it's
out.
a different situation. So it's one that, can maybe seem scary, but it's usually one that just goes by relatively quickly and nothing you can probably not handle.
That's such a good point, Britt, that Mars transits can have that sort of flare up quality, but they pass quickly. They're
Yep.
one of the things I often think about as like an image or an analogy for Mars things. I mean, it is, Mars can have that like disruptive or interruptive kind of quality. But the image I think about is like a toddler, a 2 or 3 year old,
Hmm.
having a temper tantrum about something. Like you've just said no to them or you've asked them to do something
Yeah.
they don't want to do. And, they have their meltdown. And I don't want to sound like I'm dismissing the child's experience, but when you're like the parent or the adult, you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a strong reaction to this.
Hmm.
And then it's gone, you
Yep.
know? And then you're like, okay. And then often, when you're the adult in the scenario, maybe you calm them down. What's going to soothe them? Do we need a snack? Do we
Hmm.
need to be distracted? Do we need to go outside and do, whatever you do? And then it's like 20 minutes later, you're like, that little hurricane has gone,
Yes. Yep. As someone with a toddler, I definitely relate. And
This is relatable for you.
it is relatable, and one thing I always do with my toddler, and that also applies to this situation, is like, okay, a tantrum happens, acknowledge that it's happening. You're having a hard time, whether that's your toddler or you,
Or
right?
you, yes, because adults have tantrums too.
And that acknowledgement goes such a long way. And it
Yes.
usually is like, ah, yes, I'm feeling this. My toddler is feeling this. Okay, great. So this is happening, let it happen, and then it will not stay very long because usually these emotions, they have a very short lifespan, right? But they
Yes.
stay longer because we cling to them. So just let it
Yes.
let it be there and then it will
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah, it's almost like let it have its outburst,
Yep.
okay, yeah, I'm not handling this. I need to, sometimes as an adult, my husband will be like, you're just having a temper tantrum right now. And I'm like, yes, and I'm having it with you so that I'm not having it, with wherever the source of it is.
Mm,
And he's like, do you need to stamp your feet? I'm like, yes, I do,
yeah.
whatever it happens. And it's that idea of just physically like moving through,
Yeah.
I love what you're saying there, Britt, about if you do get aggravated or you get angry, like this is part of being human and acknowledge that. Like it's okay. The problem with anger comes from sometimes when we deny or suppress it or when
Yeah.
we make decisions while we are in anger. So,
Yep.
yeah. That's
100%.
that's
Yeah.
the trick is like to develop enough self-awareness or self-regulation to be like, oh, I notice I'm angry right now. I'm going to
Yeah.
attend to that before I come back to whatever it is that, stirred this to begin.
Yeah.
So these are the things we learn in Mars transits, I believe.
Yep.
We get insights about our own anger response, what activates it, what triggers it, but also how we can help ourselves move through it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, what a great chat. I feel like we spent much longer than we normally do. So this was so good. We wanted to give those benefics their due today, didn't we, Brett? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
and I think that's good. Always a
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Britt, how can people find out more about you and your work? Where's the best place for people to reach you?
So people can reach me through my website, which is innerverse.nl. I am based in the Netherlands, so I want to give a shout out to the people from Belgium and the Netherlands and even Ireland, like in my part of the
Yes.
world. It's nice.
Yes. Yeah.
I do astrology consultations and I also do somatic coaching, so I combine the two. And yeah, if someone's interested in working with me, check out my website, innerverse.nl.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brett, for being here. And of course, you can find out more about me and my courses and teachings in astrology over at kellysastrology.com. My next live webinar is at the end of June, and it is all about Jupiter and Cancer. So if you would like even more on this very juicy transit, I look forward to seeing you then. And the details are over at kellysastrology.com. But mostly, we're just so happy to have been able to spend this time with you. If you're catching us after the live broadcast, you can leave any questions or comments in the comment section below. We look forward to seeing you hopefully next month. So until then, everyone, thanks again, Britt. And I want to wish Britt, but to everyone, happy Venus in Taurus season.
Yeah.
Let's enjoy
Let's
it.
enjoy it. Yeah. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Kelly.
my
Nice to be
pleasure.
here.
Okay, let me see. Here we go. Okay.